And welcome to Serenity in Leadership's series on leading responsibly with integrity and purpose. A series dedicated to conversations with people who are shining examples of this kind of leadership. I'm Thom Dennis, and today I'm delighted to welcome Claude Bertrand, who is a friend, an old client, and now the Executive Vice President of Research and Development and Chief Scientific Officer of Servier, an independent international pharmaceutical company which is governed by a non-profit foundation. He has a significant breadth of experience, having worked previously at many of the pharmaceutical giants, Novartis, Roche, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Ipsen. Apart from working in a fascinating industry, one of the reasons we asked Claude to join us is because he's an extraordinary leader. And I know this firsthand, having worked with him. So welcome, Claude. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Thom. Thanks for the invitation. It's really delightful to be with you today.
Fantastic. So let's get stuck in. You are a very modest man, so maybe you don't view yourself in this way, but I think you're a pioneer leader in the pharmaceutical sector. How do you lead so well in a world that is moving so fast?
So that's a $1,000 question, and there's plenty of things to be said here. But the first thing really is to always remember where you're coming from. And thanks for trusting me to be humble and to work with some humility in what I do. But I fundamentally think that it comes very far out from the education you're getting and the kind of path you have been through until you get to your career and eventually you get to a management position. And I don't know if I'm doing it so well to start with, but what I know is that I never forget where I was coming from. And there's a couple of characteristic, and I would not qualify myself as going through a tough life, but I had number of obstacles as a child and as a family overall. And I think that helps me a lot to develop some characteristic that still helps me now. And some of those is first to be humble. And I was educated that way. So no show off, no publicity about whatever you do badly or in the right way. But it's really to look at life in an humble way, to be very open, to be extremely curious, and that's not so much education, but also part of your DNA or not. And I think that helped me a lot. To be ready to fail, learn from your failures. This attitude, I never planned for my career. And for me, there's a lot about learning as you walk. And if you combine being curious and learning as you walk, it's amazing what you can do and what you can achieve. Absolutely focus on diversity, not one size fits all. So being always aware of how you can do things in different ways, so adaptable, agility, and probably many others. But that's the one that are coming to my mind as we are talking, and during this first question this morning is the world is moving fast, and so you have to be adaptable and you have to be agile. And so I think all the characteristics as described are helping to basically evolve. And so even more important, if you start to lead other people and to be able to give them confidence in this moving world, you have to have some of those characteristics.
So if I hear you right, you haven't really had goals. You've just been in the moment doing things in the best way that you can, and your career and your life has evolved through that. Is that right?
Not entirely. So I have, in different parts of my life, I had certain kind of medium, long-term objectives. When I was a horse rider and I was progressing towards competition, I think I have a terrible bias of wanting to win. So that's definitely a driver on its own, whatever field. Now, I never had the objective to be a French champion. That was not, the objective was, you know, how can I do best what I enjoy at that moment? It was horse riding. When I decided to move towards pharmaceutical industry, and therefore all the trainings to go there at university, I was passionate about what I was doing. And then I was giving myself the objective or the goal to say, how can I do that piece the best way possible? And that's the dynamic in a way, and that's how things eventually follow. I think during this time together, we'll talk a lot about purpose. I mean, that's part of the title of your series. But for me, is purpose and passion are two words that drives many things I've done in my life. Even in an environment where, you know, my mom, my grandmother, who admire me a lot as the son or the grandson, but not because I was just a fantastic student or a fantastic at sport as a kid. They were just very supportive. Yeah. And I found in myself the passion, the purpose in all of the things I've done. And we could go for hours as well in terms of building a family, having numerous kids and all. It's always the same recurring theme is, what's your purpose? And how much passion can you put into what you're doing? And that's, for me, traits that are really, really, really important for leaders.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you. So in one of our recent interviews with Dean Carter, who used to lead global HR and shared services at Patagonia, which is a company that I can get really passionate about, he challenged the concept that the so-called VUCA world in which we find ourselves today is unique, that there was probably as much volatility in, for instance, the 1960s. Do you think things are more challenging today for leaders, or are we just talking about it much more?
So, first of all, I must say I enjoyed this podcast. It was just great. The guy got so much energy, and it's true that the company raised lots of interest to me. But so back to your question. I mean, first, I think I think the world has been evolving all the time, and if I'm thinking about all the revolution just in the kind of last century, the 20th century, I think they are tremendous. If you start from really the beginning of the 19th and going up to 2020 is just immense. I think so. I tend to agree with him. I think VUCA is a little bit of a kind of the word of the moment. I think things have been evolving all the time. For me, the big difference, and I'm not sure if it's more or less challenging, but the big thing is the dynamic and the acceleration of change. So I think we've been changing all the time, and we see that now with obviously all the work on the climate change and of that. It's always been climate change. Is that the speed at which is happening, and the parallel is true for the revolution, the digital world. You know, it's like you got a slow evolution, and suddenly there's an acceleration. And I think on many different aspects, we are changing as probably it was changing post-war. You know, if I'm listening, when I was listening to my parents in the 50s, 60s, even the 70s, I started to realize what was going on, lots of things change, but I don't think they change at the same speed. And I think that's what we have to deal with today, is to adapt to change as we have always been adapting to change, but at a very different pace. And so I tend to agree. I think it's not more VUCA today than it was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, but it's accelerating drastically. And so we need to adapt in a much faster way. So I'm back to, we need to be agile. I think we need to be calm. We'll come back to that later on. I mean, I think you have to impose on yourself to observe. Again, I was back to being curious, observing and all of that, and not jump or not feeling that you are kind of forced into change just because around you it's turning like crazy. And that's maybe, you know, the phenomenon that we are experiencing and today, and we see that in the work environment. I mean, the number of burnout, people quitting their job, wanting to do something completely different because they're just fed up by the speed at which things are going, and they are calling on, you know, almost a period of calm, being able to take some distance out of this washing machine that you feel that you are in all the time. And I think there's a lot to be done by a leader in that environment, is that you have to impose, almost dictate those kind of moments where you can think, where you can take distance, rather than just oh, here's the news of the morning, and we are, you know, completely overwhelmed by the information and crisis one after the other. So really, for me, not so much a change in evolution, but clearly an acceleration, and that's what we need to deal with right now.
Yeah, it reminds me. I often think of this. You know, I was privileged enough to go down the Grand Canyon rafting some years ago, and there were a couple of canoeists that came with us. And, you know, before each of the rapids, and they're pretty scary things, the rapids, you know, we'd all get out and we'd go and sort of look at the layout, and everyone would plot their route, which would, even for those who had been down it a number of times, it changes depending on the power of the water and so on. And it's a very strong metaphor for me to see the canoeists when they have to set their route. But actually, when they're in the rapid, there's very little they can do except to do very small alterations. And those are absolutely in the moment. And there's this kind of inner peace that has to exist so that you allow the flow, and you're just making the right adjustments, which are very small in the moment.
Yes.
And I think that's a kind of analogy that for me around leadership is sort of very apt, really.
It's a very good one, actually. It's a very good one, because I think that's the when you have lots of changes, excitement, even crisis, the last thing to do is basically to jump in. And as a man of action, maybe 10, 20 years ago, you know, you have known me then, I would have jumped. I think I've learned a lot of the value of, and it doesn't take that much time. You're not wasting time. You're not losing time. You're actually just taking the right time to analyze the situation and making sure that you avoid some really big mistakes. And sometimes, as you said, just follow the flow, and with a bit of touch in key parts of the organization, of the project, and all of that, you know, you'll get to the right place and achieve your goals. So I like
and of course, I think when people are in this kind of situation where they're very uncertain. They look to their leaders, and if the leader, it's not that they don't know what to do, because often they don't, but if they see the leader who is grounded and calm within themselves, then the calm is very infectious, as is the panic. So I see that as a real responsibility of leaders. And I think I've witnessed that with you, is that sense of groundedness that people find really reassuring.
And I learned that we are back to observing. And if you have, I will not say admiration, but if you follow your leaders and you are ready to learn from them, and I remember two, one was at Ipsen at the time of major crisis, stock price going from, I don't know, 40, 50 to 20 type of things we are seeing at the moment. Mark at that time, Mark de Garidel, teach me about what taking time to think and calm was about. I'm not sure he was calm inside, but he was giving the impression that we'll go through that storm and things will be fine. I learned tremendously. And I must say, Olivier today, with my with the CEO of Servier, is probably of the same type of character. Sure, they have peaks and troughs like anybody else, but they don't show it. And when things are really getting tense, and again, potentially a certain crisis, they are almost giving you the impression that they are calmer than when things are going fine. And it's, as you said, extremely reassuring for people in your leadership team, and allow them then to think and try to take the right action to counter the crisis.
I guess following on from that, as someone working in pharmaceuticals, when COVID broke, what were the leadership dynamic challenges that you had to deal with?
You know, I could probably spend hours to talk about our industry. And sometimes I feel how unfair people are against the pharmaceutical industry, which is actually a wonderful industry, and an industry that saves life. So in a health crisis, I mean, clearly we were almost automatically back to our main purpose. Our main purpose is to save life. Now, each of us as pharmaceutical industry, we're in different position. You are in infectious disease, you are not in infectious disease. So if you are not, which was our case, what can you do to help? And that was the second element that I found fascinating at Servier, is that we are a non-profit foundation. And this is the first company I work for. And I think it's almost the only one in the pharmaceutical business, which is a truly non-profit foundation. No shareholders, no family left. And therefore, we can do things that others cannot. And we have done, I don't know how many donations, but I think what I found really interesting is that very, very quickly, we were very clear about what we wanted to do is to help as much as possible. And that's from a financial perspective, from a material perspective. You know, we send PCR equipment to do diagnostic all over the place in all the countries we are in. We were basically moving machines around. And the last thing, which I've not seen in any other company, every medical doctor in the company immediately raised their hand and said, I want to help. They went back to hospital. And obviously, as a company, there was no second of discussion. All medics were released and said, you know, you go work in the emergency room for as long as needed. And for some of them, it was like 4, 5, 6 months out of job, but from one day to the other. But all of that, I will summarize them under the the topic purpose. We know why we're existing. We know why the founder created this company 70 years ago, and everybody aligned very quickly. So on that front, that's basically what we did, and it was super easy in a way to align all the company behind us. Mm. The other things that comes to my mind is obviously, and that has nothing to do with pharmaceuticals or medics and all of that, is, my God, in a very still Franco-French company in certain aspects of its culture, remote work, it was fantastic. That's where you know that change is great. Getting out of your zone of comfort is great. I don't know how long it would have been to implement remote work at Servier, generally speaking. Yeah. In this environment, it was so efficient. We moved from no teams to teams, almost overnight. And the entire, IT organization was super aligned and all of that to make sure that we will continue to deliver. Because that's the other major aspect for us, was to say, okay, crisis understood. How do we continue to deliver drugs? Because everybody was talking about COVID, but cancer continued to progress, cardiometabolism disease continued to progress. And the idea is, how can we get the medics on time to patients? So we had no choice but to have our plants to continue to manufacture the product. In my R&D organization, there was no question that we needed to continue to do our research and development. And so, but back to the same thing, our purpose was super clear. What we needed to deliver was super clear. And so past the move from face-to-face to teams, the rest stayed the same. And it was even kind of somewhat, I would say, energizing, because then there was an urgency to say no rupture in delivery of our drugs and no rupture in our clinical trials, because that would have been a catastrophe, but mostly a catastrophe for the patients. So I think we'll write probably many books and movie around COVID when will be truly fully over. But there were so many learnings, but in a way they allow you to extract what's really absolutely key to succeed and to lead through crisis. You have to have a vision, you have to have a purpose, and that's easier in the pharmaceutical industry than other industry.
So what traits do you think are the most crucial to have as a good leader today? Because what was important even 5 years ago is probably not what is advantageous or even essential now.
I think it's probably back to some of the traits I was talking about answering your first question. Certain things are so unpredictable that you have to be, it's almost like being I don't know what I would use as a metaphor, but for me, it's like wild animals on being extra sensitive to your environment and surround yourself with as much diversity as you can in a very, again, very humble way. I'm saying there is no wrong, right answer. There are probably many answers to whatever situation. And so more diverse, more open, more curious, more listening you are, better chance you have to find your way and being able to move forward in an efficient way. And I must say, that's probably things that you learn over a long period of time. And I've been a lot about luck too. Huh? I've been very lucky to come across people, go work in different countries, different culture, because that helps you a lot to open up and say there's not one way of doing things. And it's kind of interesting because that's I still see in a company with strong culture of a tendency, and it's a fine balance between what is your DNA that you don't want to give up, that have made the success of a company, and how do you, and what's the proportion of that versus what are you ready to open up to new dimensions, new ways, and full diversity. And that's, it's not an easy, there's not a magic recipe, but all of that will make you successful. But listen, be curious, and open up to diversity.
This is one of the things that struck me as you were talking there is something that I talk a lot about. Is I think today leaders need to know themselves. You know, in the past, I think there was a lot of bluster and much more a directive style that was typical. But today, you know, we really do need to know ourselves and what drives us, what our beliefs are, what our biases are, and what our own purpose is. Well, I come across a certain resistance in a lot of leaders when you ask them to, no, don't look at anybody else. Turn the microscope inwards, you know? What's your experience of that?
No, I totally agree. And that's a major change from managements of the 60s, even probably the 70s. And it's also interesting on the type of leaders we are now looking at versus probably the one we were looking at 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah. For me, what you are describing, which I agree fully with, is how can you get, maybe I will first ask the question is, how do you get to authenticity if you don't know yourself and you are not inside yourselves absolutely clear on what you want to achieve on this on earth, and how do you want to do that with your team, with a larger organization, whatever it is. It's first to admit that there's not many things that you achieve. So if your objective, let's start there, is to have an impact, and we are on this planet for a fairly short period of time. Getting older, you realize how short it is, and but if you still have the same purpose that you had when you were 30 or 40, is to have an impact, to say, you know, I've done something useful on this planet. And again, in our industry, it's maybe easier than in other industry. You know, staying apart from family matters, because it's exactly the same story. But to be able to do that, you have to be authentic. And let's start by the principle that people are not stupid. So they will not follow. That's my very strong belief, is that they will not follow a leader that today that do not display some form of authenticity. Mm-hmm. And that's not something you can, you know, transform, play with, and all of that. Either you are or you are not. And it starts by actually being really open and transparent about yourself and what you feel about yourself. As any human being, you have plus and minuses, and the most important thing is not to have only plus or make minus disappear. It's just to know it, and therefore, in your interaction with others, you'll be in a much, again, you will be grounded. I love that expression you used before. Is that helps you to know exactly who you are, where you want to go. Then it makes it simple with other people. So
you currently work at Servier, which I know specializes in cardiology, oncology, neuroscience, and inflammation. Are these key areas how Servier distinguishes itself from other large pharmaceuticals, or is it something else? And I know you've just touched on that a little, but say a little more.
To make it short on one side, because I could go for hours on science and medicine, and that's not the purpose today, is that obviously we try to differentiate ourselves from a scientific and medical point of view. That's for sure. But for me, the major difference and the reason I got very deeply attached to this organization, it's because it's a foundation. And where does it make a difference? It makes a difference in a world where, for the moment, still profitability, profit in general, making shareholders happy is the main objective and main purpose. And I've worked in those companies, and I've learned different things in those companies. So I'm not trying to make the good and the bad of this world, but what makes Servier different is the fact that it's governed by a foundation. And so we can go in area where others are not going, because it's either a very long journey, it's either a very risky journey, and probably the third element is that we don't know yet if it's going to be profitable. And sometimes it's an addition of 2, sometimes it's the addition of 3, because we are doing projects sometimes to go after a disease that affects 1 kid. But we believe that if we can do something and we have the capabilities and competencies to do it, we will do it. And we are doing it. So that's unique. In my view, at least in my 30 years experience in this business, that's unique. And so if you go in the area you quoted, is that, how can we go where others are not going? How to treat cancer? You have seen some of the announcement on some of the big ones at the moment and say, anything that doesn't do at least 2 billion in sales, we are not interested. That's not how we are looking at it. Obviously, even in a non-profit foundation, you need to make profit, otherwise you die. And so we are injecting all our profit to finance R&D, to upgrade our facilities, etc., etc. But that's our purpose. That's our purpose, and it's fascinating. We worked obviously like any others a lot with patients, patient associations. It rings a bell for these guys, because it's not just words. We are all working for patients, and we have somewhere patients in our. But for us, it's the ultimate beneficiary. There is no shareholder. So the ultimate beneficiary is the patient. And so that allows us to go in a pediatric cancer, pediatric rare disease, where there is really, Thom, nothing today. Where, death comes after 5 months, 6 months, a couple of years after diagnosis. And there's a lot to be done. Now, would we be successful? I don't know, because it's a tough road, but we're able to take that tough roads as soon as we balance basically our portfolio with some easier project to make sure that we are surviving through. So for me, that makes a huge difference. And I honestly didn't realize that before getting in. But it's it's basically in the wall, it's in the DNA of people who have been in this organization for a long time. It's just an amazing place for that. And me, I always woke up in the morning excited to start the day, but it's even more today than it has ever been, because that's the ultimate purpose.
Fabulous. So going on from that, social responsibility is very important, both to you and to Servier. So can tell us more about that and why you think it's increasingly meaningful in business as a whole?
For many different reasons, but number one, you have to personally believe that it is something meaningful and you want to do something about it. That's for sure. But I think that's a must. Otherwise, we don't have the discussion. For me, I looked at it and I got, interestingly, really into it and start to understand, as a scientist will do, really on saying, first, is it true? Is it just a cycle? What's the reality? And invest more and more time. And actually, the executive committee at Servier invested more and more time in the last 12 months, really to get into the understanding before saying, okay, what can I do about it? So I think it's super important. I think it's, again, even more important if you are a foundation, because it's kind of intrinsically linked to your values. But interestingly, the angle which I found the most interesting is that if you want to attract young generation, if you want to attract young talent today, beyond having a purpose, which we have, I hope I convince you. But if you don't do anything about that, if it's not embedded in your strategy, if it's not reflected then in your project and in your objectives, I think you have no chance of getting talented young generation in your troops. So for me, and again, back, curiosity, openness, observing. Look at our kids. I don't know how yours are, but it's in every single conversation with my 20-year-old. Younger, not yet, but for them, it's almost it's becoming an habit, and not in a toxic way. It's just like, I'm buying this. Oh, where is it coming from? How is it made? And so I don't think you will attract 30 years old and younger, well, with good brain, if you are not putting a huge effort and convincing them that they can help the company to do something about it. So, and I'm a sponsor and at XCOM on many, so it goes from actually diversity and inclusion to eco packaging, and I'm finding myself sponsor of I don't know how many of those initiatives. But I think it's fundamental. It's key. And Thom, honestly, I don't know you, but I feel responsible. I can always say, well, we didn't know. Huh? It's like getting lung cancer when you were smoking, saying, I didn't know it was toxic. But so we have participated at some of the mess we are in today. The least we can do, because we will not have much time, is to prepare for the next phase and do something about it, and at least slowing it down. So I think it's fundamental, but very much under the angle of it's only young generation that can do something about it. And I, as you know, I trust human beings and humanity a lot. That's the only belief I had in my life, and I we'll find solution and we'll solve the problem, I'm sure. But if we involve young people and they want to be involved and they want to have that as part of the purpose of their life.
Thank you. Yeah. Getting back to leadership to round up this podcast. What do you think are the two most important things leaders can do in the next few years to attract and retain employees who are passionate about their work? You might say, well, I've just answered that. I don't know if there's any other things that you can add to it.
No, I spend quite a bit of time on that topic recently, and funny enough, yes, some of it is linked to CSR at large. What do you do in that area? But interestingly, I thought a lot about it, because we are moving now all our French R&D facilities to one single site in Saclay, which is basically an area of which we would like in France to become the next Boston or the next UK Cambridge, with all schools, university, etc., etc. Now you are moving people, and for some in a fairly significant way geographically, but it's also potentially a change, even a revolution family-wise, because you have husband, wife, partners working in a, very close to where they are today. So they potentially to move, they have to change kids and all that. And so you have to ask yourself, why would a guy stay at Servier to work far away, 20 kilometers outskirts of Paris? Why do they eventually move their family and all of that? So you have to think about what is driving new generation. And I only looked at which will serve potentially older ones, but I really looked at basically what will make 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old max to work at Servier, stay at Servier with this change and all that. And because it's a new building, there's lots of things we could do to say what's important. And so you have to just survey this population. You start with your kids, but you can then enlarge and it's amazing, Thom, how much I learn. I think we were the generation where if you are passionate about your work, you work. I mean, work. We were probably wrong, but that's what many of us did from the 50s, 60s, 70s. Yeah. No more. I mean, these guys, work-life balance is one of the first things that comes up, even in the interview process. So, okay, you have to work with that. Doesn't mean that they work less, but they want a different balance in their life. And so you have to create something at work that looks like being at home. So you can alternate work activities with, I go do some sports, I go do some shoppings, I go see a movie. In the middle of the day, if I feel that would be good for me, I want to see my kids at lunchtime. And so that's basically what we are trying. We're still in the process. We will be entering the building in the spring, but it's also the opportunity of a new campus, because we are working a lot with the region, with the town nearby, and saying, what type of infrastructure are you developing? Oh, you want to make a pool? That's a really good idea. It would be a fantastic pool nearby. And I think that's basically what will make the difference. So beyond CSR at large and making that a priority for your company, but it's how do you make life at work much more qualitative in a way than just doing your work? And how do you integrate basically the company and the culture of the company as part of the overall life of an employee and somebody that you want to keep for a while? So we are also looking at, I invented a chief campus officer, because I want somebody 100% focusing on how is life on the campus, how is it attractive, how is it fun, how can we create things that are completely out of that make people really have basically fun. I think it's essential, and the ultimate goal is that I always joke with my colleagues. I said, we want to create the miss out syndrome. So you'll have somebody like we are today on Zoom and Teams, having other guys on site, having had a day full of lots of exciting stuff, work, but other things, and saying, shit, I should have gone to the site rather than stay home. So if we succeed at that, great. But I think let's go back to, that's how we will attract, retain in the long run. And some business, it's more important than other, but we are, as you know, in the pharma, we are in a very long cycle, and too much fluidity really doesn't help. So that's it's absolutely key for us. Would we succeed? I don't know, but at least that's what we are trying to do. And the opportunity of a new site, obviously, is it's the middle of very important to be close to nature. People can walk, they can run in a great environment. All of that is really important. I don't know in the UK, but I tell you, people slowly but surely are leaving Paris and the big cities to get close by to nature. That's another thing that drives young generation a lot.
Claude, we've run out of time, but thank you. It's been wonderful to speak with you and to revisit and to see where you are now and the great things that you're doing, which are just so exciting. I think all the people that work for you are very lucky. In a sense, you've created your luck. You've ended up in a place which actually so resonates with you that you can express yourself in such a full and healthy way.
Thanks, Thom. You have participated in the evolution of the leader I became. So I thank you for that too, and thank you for having me today. Thanks.